Hey guys, Edward here from Edward279, the mixed content creator. Now, food is delicious and necessary for life, but I bet you didn't know that not all the food you eat is totally harmless. That's right, there are certain foods that can in fact actually kill you. So in today's video, we're going to be discussing 15 foods that have the potential to make you sick or if worse comes to worse, kill you. So without further ado, let's get to the ranks. This plant may seem completely innocent at first glance, but be careful. The rhubarb plant indeed has a slightly poisonous surprise in its leaves. You see, rhubarb leaves contain a toxin called oxalic acid, which is actually toxic in large quantities. Sure, other vegetables we eat, such as spinach, sorrel, beets, and chard, also have it, but all of these vegetables have it in completely harmless amounts. Rhubarb leaves, however, have much more, often enough to be really poisonous. This does not mean that rhubarb as a whole is poisonous. The red stems are completely safe to eat, and even with the leaves, you'd have to eat about a pound of rhubarb leaves to have a chance of dying from the oxalic acid at all. Still, please don't do it. In addition, there are many other leafy vegetables that will not make you sick or kill you with oxalic acid. This one is probably going to be a shock for many, especially for my viewers from the US, but it has to be said. Hot dogs, no matter how delicious they are absolutely not good for you. To understand why, we have to dive into some food classification. You see, hot dogs are a type of processed meat, just like bacon, ham, sausages, and salami, which means that most hot dog brands are absolutely loaded with sodium and harmful preservatives such as nitrates and nitrites. However, this is not why hot dogs are on this list. What actually puts them on this list is that they are a choking hazard that is just waiting to happen, because their long, slender, and cylindrical shape means that a hot dog can easily get stuck in someone's throat, which can cause him or her to suffocate. So while hot dogs are not dangerous by nature, they are bad for you and a very real choking hazard, especially for young children. Now, to be real, almost all of the rice at your local grocery store is harmless, but if your rice is grown in the state of Texas, chances are it contains a deadly poison known as arsenic. To understand why Texas rice contains arsenic, we must return to the post-Civil War southern US. At the time, cotton was a booming industry in not just Texas, but the rest of the Southeast. And as it turns out, arsenic was a ubiquitous pesticide, being sprayed on cotton fields throughout the southern US. But when the Civil War ended and slavery was abolished, guess what all those cotton fields in Texas were turned into? That's right, rice paddies. And unfortunately, residues of arsenic were and still are very present in Texas soil, which leads to the plants absorbing it and becoming poisonous. In addition, raw rice can and probably will cause food poisoning. So always cook your rice before you eat it, and never get your rice from Texas. These two fruits may seem innocuous at first, but beware, as they both contain a deadly secret within. Their seeds. You see, apple and pear seeds contain the chemical amygdalin, which your digestive enzymes convert into cyanide. That's right, there's cyanide in your apple and you probably never even knew it until now. Fortunately, the apple's pulp does not contain it, and even if you were stupid, bold, or careless enough to eat the seeds, it takes a lot to kill you. 200 apple seeds to be precise. To eat that many seeds, you'd have to eat 40 apple cores, and finally chew them, as the seeds of both apples and pears have to be crushed in order to release their poison. This does not mean you should eat apple and pear seeds on purpose, as even though it might not kill you, eating even a very small amount of apple or pear seeds is most definitely a very, very, very bad idea. This fact may surprise a lot of you, but all supermarket cashews are roasted. That's right, that's right. Raw cashews are never sold at supermarkets. And for good reason. And that reason is because raw cashews are actually toxic. Let me explain. You see, cashews contain a toxin by the name of urushiol, which also appears in several other plants in its family, such as mangoes, pistachios, and the notorious trio of poison oak, ivy, and sumac. In fact, urushiol is the very same compound that makes poison ivy, oak, and sumac all so itchy. Raw cashews and their shells both contain the poison. However, roasting the cashew nuts destroys this toxin and renders the nut completely safe to eat. So yeah, supermarkets absolutely never sell raw cashews because actual raw cashews are actually toxic and contain the same stuff that makes poison ivy so itchy. While this sweeter sour fruit might seem harmless and innocent, this fruit actually packs quite the mean punch. Now, don't get confused. The cherries themselves are completely safe to eat, but their pits definitely aren't. That's because cherry pits, as well as the pits of peaches, nectarines, plums, and apricots, contain amygdalin, which your digestive enzymes end up converting into cyanide. As little as 4 crushed cherry seeds are enough to kill you, and while this seems scary, it's actually highly unlikely swallowing a cherry pit by accident is going to kill you. Because of that word, crushed. Cherry pits must be crushed or otherwise damaged in order to release their poison. So if the pit was swallowed whole, you probably don't have to worry about cyanide poisoning. That being said, whole cherry pits are still a choking hazard. So be they whole or be they crushed, never eat the pits of cherries or other stone fruits. While the red ripe tomatoes you see at the grocery store won't kill you and are in fact really good for you, do not eat any other part of the tomato plant, as all other parts of the tomato plant contain large amounts of solanine, an alkaloid also found in other nightshade family plants such as peppers, eggplant, tobacco, and another food further down this list. The only part that's completely safe to eat is the fruit, and only if it's fully ripe. That being said, people actually do eat green tomatoes, but they should be eaten in strict moderation, or better yet, not at all. A similar thing rings true for pepper and eggplant plants, as just like with tomatoes, the fully ripe fruit is the only completely edible part of the plant, with all other parts containing loads of toxic solanine. So the next time you grow tomatoes, just remember, always wait for the fruit to fully or mostly ripen before you pick it. This one is probably the most surprising entry on this list, but Brazil nuts can actually kill you if you eat too many. This is because Brazil nuts are absolutely loaded with selenium, with just one Brazil nut having over twice your daily value for selenium. But while selenium is beneficial overall, too much can become toxic, and because these nuts have so much selenium, it doesn't take a lot to get selenium poisoning. But even if you somehow manage to binge eat Brazil nuts without getting poisoned, there's something else to consider. Brazil nuts are sometimes radioactive, especially if they're from Brazil. That's because Brazilian Brazil nuts frequently contain high concentrations of radium, a radioactive element that Brazil nut trees absorb from the soil. Many experts agree that it's best to eat around 2 to 3 Brazil nuts daily to be safe. So unlike with other nuts, binging Brazil nuts could very well send you to the hospital. While this starchy root is a staple food that's eaten frequently all across Africa and some other regions, all you really have to do is prepare it wrong, or worse, eat it raw and you'll almost certainly get cyanide poisoning. That's because both raw and incorrectly prepared cassava contain cyanogenic glycosides, which get converted to, say it with me, cyanide. There are 2 types of cassava, sweet cassava and bitter cassava. Bitter cassava produces way more cyanogenic glycosides than sweet cassava, and thus requires more extensive processing, such as grating and pounding to get rid of all that extra cyanide. I'm not going to go into detail about how to prepare cassava. I'll let you look that up yourself. But overall, it's a long process to say the least. It involves soaking and boiling to get rid of the cyanide. But as long as you prepare it right and thoroughly cook it, you can enjoy this tasty root crop without risking getting cyanide poisoning. Another staple crop on this list, this time spanning Europe, Canada, and the US, the humble potato is yet another innocent-looking food that's actually deadly. And no, I'm not referencing the Irish potato famine. No, what I actually mean by saying potatoes can kill you is that they're poisonous. The starchy tubers are the only part of the plant that's edible, because all other parts of the plant contain high levels of solanine, which you may remember from when I talked about tomatoes earlier on. Oh, and raw potatoes have quite a lot. Enough that raw potatoes are genuinely poisonous. Cooking potatoes, however, destroys the toxins and renders the spuds completely safe to eat. Also, stay away from green potatoes, as they have significantly more solanine than regular potatoes, and cooking them will not get rid of the poison. As the national fruit of the island country of Jamaica, you'd think that the ackee fruit is perfectly harmless. But if you did, you'd be dangerously mistaken. That's because unripe ackee fruit contains the poisons hypoglycin A and hypoglycin B, which, if eaten, causes extreme vomiting, as well as several other nasty side effects collectively known as Jamaican vomiting sickness. Ripe ackee fruit, however, is harmless for the most part. But even if the fruit is ripe, don't ever eat the black seeds, as they never lose their toxicity no matter what you do to them. To tell if an ackee fruit is ripe or not, check if the fruit has naturally split open yet. If it has, you're in the clear. If it hasn't, it's not ripe yet and is poisonous. Also, the creamy white pulp that's also known as the aril of the fruit is the only edible part, because the red ackee pod as well as the black seeds are both toxic. While you'd never expect a food as ubiquitous as the lima beans to be poisonous, the truth is, they aren't. As long as they're properly cooked, that is. Raw and undercooked lima beans are actually poisonous, as they contain linamarin, a cyanogenic glycoside which is converted to hydrogen cyanide by your digestive enzymes. Fortunately, however, all lima beans grown here in the US must have less than 200 milligrams of cyanide per kilogram, which means most of the time, 1 or 2 raw limas is unlikely to harm you. However, it is still best that your lima beans are cooked properly, and in the case of dried limas, it's recommended you soak them for at least 8 hours to leach out anti-nutrients and speed up the cooking process. Overall, lima beans can be toxic, but only if they're raw or not prepared correctly. A raw octopus dish with its origins traced back to South Korea, San-nakji is made from quote-unquote live long-armed octopus. The reason they put live in quotes is because the octopi are chopped into small pieces and already dead by the time you eat it. It's just that the tentacles are still moving due to ganglia that operate separately from the rest of the octopus's body. And the tentacles, more specifically the suction cups on the tentacles, are exactly what makes this such a dangerous dish. That's because the suction cups can stick to your throat if not completely chewed, which can cause the unlucky diner to choke to death. Remember, the tentacles are still moving, and the suction cups are still very much so capable of sticking to your throat and causing you to asphyxiate to your grave. But I'm not trying to stop you. If you want to try it, go ahead. But don't say I didn't warn you if you end up choking to a flatline. Another pantry staple that can straight up kill you if eaten raw or undercooked, the kidney bean really sets the bar for the term mean beans, and not in a good way. That's because kidney beans contain a toxin by the name of phytohemagglutinin, a type of lectin that serves as an incredibly potent poison. As few as 4 raw kidney beans can cause a wide array of nasty side effects, including extreme nausea and vomiting early on, with indigestion and diarrhea following soon after. It's for this reason that kidney beans must be cooked before being eaten, as proper cooking destroys the toxin and renders the beans completely safe to eat. Also, for dry kidney beans, it's recommended to soak for at least 8 hours, but whether or not it's necessary is up for debate. Canned kidney beans, however, don't need to be soaked, and can be cooked straight away. Finally, we come to fugu, arguably the most dangerous food in the world. Fugu is a type of pufferfish which contains the incredibly potent poison tetrodotoxin, with the amount needed to kill you being able to fit on a pinhead. Only some parts of the pufferfish contain the highly poisonous chemical, but Japanese chefs still have to be really, really, really careful, as just one mistake when removing the liver or other poisonous parts can poison the rest of the fish. And because it has such a great potential to be so dangerous and potentially deadly, both the US and EU banned fugu. And in Japan, only licensed chefs are allowed to prepare the dish, with chefs requiring to not only go through 3 years of training, but to also pass a fugu handling exam to obtain a license. So when it comes to fugu, all you really have to do is eat at the wrong restaurant and you could die. So there you have it. 15 foods that you probably never suspected can actually kill you. We hope you enjoyed this video. As always, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!